Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video series, we're creating an Azure data pipeline. Again, quick overview, uploading a local Excel file into an Azure Data Lake storage account, which launches the Data Factory pipeline via an event trigger, which then sends the data to Databricks Notebook via a Python script to clean and transform it. Sends the clean data then to a new Azure Data Lake storage folder, and then it loads the clean data into an Azure SQL database as well. In this particular part, we're going to create and configure Databricks to connect with Data Lake and then load data into Databricks from the Data Lake storage account. Again, in our previous video, we created the Data Lake storage account and uploaded a CSV file and then created a key vault. If you're unsure of how to do those, feel free to go back to the previous video to watch those. But now we're going to use these parts right here. So let's get started. So in this video section, we're going to create a Databricks workspace. Now to do that, just go up here to this create a resource and search for Databricks and hit this little create button here. All right, you can pick on a new resource group if you want. You use the same resource group. Again, resource group just houses different Azure resources and keeps things separate for you. We'll create a workspace name, Databricks JL555. Okay, whatever you want to create. In this pricing tier, you can keep it on standard, but if this is your first time doing this, I'd recommend doing the trial where you get their premium service free for 14 days. This gives you additional functionality and different things you can do. So I, give it a try for 14 days. If you want to keep it on standard, we can still do that and use it with us, what we're using today. But again, if you're doing it, just keep on this. All right, and we're going to review and create, and then hit the create button to create this. It'll take a couple minutes to load, not a big deal. It'll do that for you. Now, I already have one created, so I won't do this, but just go ahead and click that button. Now, to get to it, you can either type in your search bar for Databricks, right? And type in your Databricks workspace, whatever name you named it. You can go to your resource group and any way to find it. And then once you click in it, right around here is going to say a blue button called Launch Workspace, and click on that to launch the workspace. That's going to bring you up to this home page here. And if you're unfamiliar with what Databricks is, it's a cloud-based big data engineering tool. It allows you to process and transform massive amounts of data very quickly and cost effectively. And the reason it can do this is because it's built upon Apache Spark, which is just an open source distributed cluster computing framework. You could think of it as a big processing engine. And how it works is Apache Spark actually will divide your work into different workers in different tasks. So what that does is, let's say you have a CSV file with millions of rows. Apache Spark can actually divide your work up into a lot of different sections. You can think of it like a bunch of different computers are all working at the same time on your same file, just in different pieces of it. It's called parallelization. It's really, really powerful. And so what we're going to do is, when you're in Databricks, the first thing you have to do is create a cluster. And what a cluster is just a group of compute resources to help you process all the files and everything you want to do. And then while I'm going to show you here, I'm going to get this up and running. But what you want to do here is, if you don't have a cross cluster yet, you want to create a cluster. Now, before we begin here, there's something very, very important to talk about. If you just signed up for the Azure free service, where you get the $200 for 30 days and you get the year of free services, you won't be able to create a cluster, right? It'll give you an error saying there's not enough regional cores, because when you have the Azure free service, you only get 4 cores. To use Databricks, I believe you need either 6 or 8 cores to be able to use it. Now, there is a quick fix, though, to do this. All you have to do is, when you go back to your main homepage, you want to click on your Cost Management and Billing blade down here. And then what you're going to do is, in this kind of middle section here, it's going to say Upgrade to Pay-as-you-go. Now, again, if you upgrade to Pay-as-you-go, you still keep your $200 for the first 30 days. You don't lose any of that money. You can still use it. You still get your year of services, but it kind of puts you in like a different tier that allows you to then use more cores and use Databricks. So again, you can Google upgrade to pay-as-you-go, or just go to that cost management and billing and find it on there and upgrade it. But again, you still use your funds. You can still use those funds, and you still get the year of services, but this puts you in a different tier to be able to create a cluster. So we're back here in Databricks to create a cluster. You want to create a cluster name. Again, this is just a group of compute resources, so we can do the new cluster or whatever you want. As far as the mode, we'll keep it on standard here. The other option is high concurrency, and that's if, for instance, if you have multiple users wanting to access the same cluster at the same time, you can do that. And some other things, but this is just us. We'll just keep it as standard. The Databricks runtime shows that, look, this version only supports Python 3. If you had, let's say, different machine learning ones you wanted to use, you can do that. If you had, let's say, Python 2, you can use an older version of the runtime that supports Python 2, but we'll just keep ours as the default here. Now, the autopilot options are pretty neat. So the first one here is auto-scaling. So as I mentioned, that Apache Spark can divide your work up into different sections and have different, you can call them kind of computers, called workers, processing those. And so it can auto-scale, so it can actually bring more compute resources if you have larger and larger files. So you can keep this on, you can turn it off since we have a small file, but no harm in keeping it on for right now, as long as we manage that. Second, another option here is that it will terminate after 120 minutes of inactivity. What that means is this will terminate our cluster. It won't delete it, but if we don't use it for 120 minutes, it'll just make it inactive. And that's great because we don't want our cluster to run forever if we have it active. It'll just kind of inactivate it. We can always bring it back online. And then down here is our worker type. And again, so Apache Spark, the architecture just kind of under the hood is it starts with a driver node, and then that driver node sends all the communication and workloads to the different worker nodes. And those workers have different tasks. Again, the division of your work. So for the worker type, you can use different kind of processing systems. You can use a little bit cheaper ones. You can use older ones or newer ones. We'll just keep ours at the default. And for min workers, we're just going to do 1. And max, we're going to keep it at 2 to kind of keep our costs in line. And our file's pretty small, so we don't need too many. And then for the driver, you can do the same thing, keep it the same, or do a different one, but we'll just keep ours the same. Now you can click on this advanced option setting, and you can click on this enable credential pass-through. And what this allows you to do is actually create authentication that's a lot quicker to access files from your data lake storage account, which is pretty great. The downside, though, is that since in our pipeline we use Data Factory to complete a number of steps, you cannot use this with Data Factory. It will error on you. It won't allow you to do it. We have to set it up a different way. So that's kind of the downside to it. But if you're just looking to kind of load some files in really quickly, this is a great point to do that. So you want to keep this enabled. All right, and then once this is done, you're going to create the cluster. And since I already have one, I won't do that. But again, just click on here to create it. All right, and then when you're on here, you want to make sure that your cluster is running, which is this little green bar. If it's not, hit start here to get it going. You can also terminate it if you want to at any point, or delete it, anything like that. Now, let's get to the fun stuff. So we're going to create a notebook. And to create a notebook, we're going to click on this little workspace button. And then anywhere in the white here, you're going to right-click and go to this create, and then create a notebook. And you can create, let's say, notebook 10. You can create this whatever you want. And then the default language is set at Python, but you can change this to Scala, SQL, or R as a default language. Now, what's really great about Databricks is even if you use the default language of Python and set it up as Python in the notebook, you can still use SQL and R in different cells in the same notebook. It's really, really neat, and I'll show you that in the next video after this. But I'll keep ours as Python. And you want to attach your cluster, so we'll keep our new cluster and attach it on there, and hit create. And now here's our notebook. Now, how do we link Databricks to Data Lake and load files from there? Well, if we go to the Databricks documentation for Data Lake, and to get to this page, all you're going to have to do is just Google Data Lake space Databricks, and then go down until you see Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, and click on this. And what's going to show you is there's a couple ways to do it, but the main way is to mount an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 file system to DBFS. And DBFS just means Databricks File System. Databricks File System. That's just Databricks' kind of unique file system that they use. And you're going to use it, authenticate in using a service principal and authentication 2.0. And a service principal is just an object that allows you to create an identity in Azure. And then you can grant resources to it. You can grant access to it for different resources and different things like that. And the reason we do this is Microsoft doesn't own Databricks, right? Databricks is its own entity. If you go on to Amazon Web Services, you can use Databricks, right? Now, Databricks is optimized for Azure, but what Databricks would like you to do is to keep everything kind of contained. So I want you to create an identity that says, hey, this is my identity from Azure. I created this identity, and then I actually, I have the correct resources assigned to me and the permissions to be able to use, for instance, the data lake to access. So Databricks says, okay, and then we can use that. So that's why we create this. So it's pretty useful. Then if you're wondering what mounting is, it's just more of a pointer from Databricks to the data lake. So it doesn't sync files locally. It's just kind of, you can think of it as a string that's just pointing from Databricks to the data lake and connecting the two. All right, so the first step here is to actually create a service principal in Azure. So we're back in Azure here, and to create a service principal, you're just going to go down to Azure Active Directory, which is just your kind of central location to manage different users and groups if you had them, or manage the different applications or third-party entities that you might be having to access your resources. And you're going to go down here and click on App Registrations. All right, and you're going to click on New Registration here. So this is kind of creating our mini application, which is our service principal. All right, which is kind of like a unique identity you can think of. Okay, so we can type this in as application, 15, or you can name this whatever you want to. And this URL, you're going to type in http // and then whatever you want. So newthing.com, or you can do whatever you want here. You can do whatever you want here. Again, you can change this later. This is just the URL. You can always change this later. And you're going to click register. Now, I already registered one, so I'm not going to do this, but again, just click right on here. Now, to get to your application, you're going to go to App Registrations here back in your Azure directory. So click on this, and you're going to click on whatever name you just created, right? I have the application 2, so I have that right up here. Okay, and a couple quick things. Once you create your Azure Active Directory application, it's going to give you in the middle here an application ID and a directory ID. You want to save those in some kind of notepad. And to access a notepad like this, you can go to your Start menu in the bottom left and click that, and click TXT, type in TXT, and then click on Notepad there to get that. But again, I'm saving this application ID. And again, if you need to get to it again, you can go to the overview, and I'll show you the application ID as well. And just make sure you save that. Okay, now that we have our service principal set up, we need to create a secret password for it. So we need to create a password for this application. And the reason we do this is we're going to need to authenticate it into a Databricks and kind of register it. So you go right here to this new client secret, and if you're in the overview, click on the certificates and secrets blade, then click on new client secret. And we're going to give it a name. So application secret. And then you want to save that in here. And I already kind of saved that in there for us. Okay, but if I want to save that name. And this can expire in 1 year, 2 years, or never expire. We'll keep it as the default here. And we're going to add it. Now, this is very important. You want to make sure you copy this value and copy and save it somewhere. Okay. Once you get off of this page, you won't be able to see this value again. So save this first. That's very, very important. Okay. Now, we just set up our application, which is our service principal. We just gave it a secret password. And now we have to actually assign a role to it or grant access to something. Right now, it's created, but we can't do anything with it. Nothing's granted. We don't have any roles assigned to it. So what you're going to do is, back in your data lake, storage account here, and you click on this access control. Just click on that. We're actually going to add a role assignment. Okay, it's going to go to that and select a role right up here. And now there's different roles you can assign. Like for instance, this is the reader assignment, which just lets you view everything but not make any changes. So you need things, but for our purposes, we're going to do this George Splab Data Contributor. That means that we can access the storage data link. And to find it, you're going to search for whatever application name you just created. So mine was application 2. It's going to bring it up here, and you're going to save it right here. Okay, now I already added the role to here. It was already assigned, so that's why it errored for me, but yours is going to say it created it. Okay, it's going to add that role right there. Now, that's great. We have our role now. It's assigned. We're pretty set up in that scope. Next thing you want to do is go into your Key Vault. And again, the Key Vault is a central location that stores all of your passwords, your secrets, all of your important things there. And we want to set up our Key Vault. So you're going to click on this secrets here. And we're going to generate an import. Now, we want to save our application ID into this secret. So you can type this application secret. And again, in our Key Vault secret name, you want to save that there. Okay. And then the value is actually going to be your application ID. Okay. I'm sorry, it's actually going to be the secret value that you created. So that's going to be right here. So that's that secret. Remember when we created that secret in the application? This is going to be the secret value. You're going to store that right there. So what this is doing, this is storing your service principal secret password. Okay. Okay, this is application secret 2. We'll just make that. Okay. And that stored it here. So now this is pretty set up. Now, we're going to go back into Databricks. Okay, and now we're going to set this up. So the first thing you want to do is we have to link our Key Vault with our Databricks to authenticate it in with using that service principal. Okay, remember, the password is now saved in Key Vault. So now we want to just link those together with Databricks. So what you're going to do is go up, whenever you're in your notebook here, you're up to the top, you're going to click once to highlight everything, and then click once again to get this HTTPS area. And then take this and delete everything up through the notebook. And then type in secrets/create scope, and scope has to be a capital S, or this isn't going to work. And hit enter. And we're creating a secret scope. Okay, and we're going to make a new secret scope name called, we can call it Databricks New Secret Scope, New Secret 3. Okay, and you want to save this again to somewhere else. Okay, that's going to be right in this scope name. And then you see here where it says Key Vault. That's why I set up that Key Vault, because we can authenticate right through Key Vault. So this DNS name, to be able to find this, all you're going to do is go under Properties, this blade right here, and it'll bring this up in the middle section, and it'll bring up your DNS name. It'll also bring in your resource ID name. So again, click on Properties in this blade, and then just copy to the clipboard those two sections right there. They're going to be right next to each other right there. And I already have mine saved here. So I'm just going to copy that in. Okay, and I'm going to load that in. And then we're going to create our secret scope. Okay, That shows that it's been added, so that's perfect. Okay, now we're going to go back into our workbook, and now let's actually connect to the data lake. So in the documentation, if you scroll down a little bit here, it'll show you that first we had to create and grant permissions to a service principal. We just did that using that storage blob data contributor. So that's perfect. And now you want to actually go in and copy this code. Just copy this block of code. This is written in Python here. If you're using Scala as the default language, you want to click on Scala. But again, we're using Python, so just click on this. Go to your notebook, and then click on here. And this looks like a lot, but I'm going to explain things to you. It's not going to be too bad, I promise. There's only a couple things we have to do. This is just the configuration to mount everything, to connect to the data lake through Databricks. So the first thing you want to do is under this application ID, that's that application ID that you saved. So we're going to go back up to our notepad. It's that original application ID. And again, if you need to go to the Azure Active Directory app registrations, click in your app, and then it's going to show that in the first thing application ID. I'm going to put that right in here. The secret, so now it's going to get us that scope name. So remember that secret scope that we created in Databricks? Right? That was this one right here. So we're going to create that right in here. And then what the key is going to be is actually going to be that key vault application secret, right? That name that we made in the key vault from the application. And again, what this is going to do is it's going to actually find the password, that application password that we use, but we don't have to actually write it in here. Now, in normal cases, since we're doing this together, and I'm going to delete this later, you'll see the application ID here. But in the real world situation, you actually want to version control this. And I'll actually show you how to do this. So you don't want people to see your application ID just out in the open like this in a normal notebook. So you want to version control this. And I'll show you exactly how to do this right now. And just an example. I'll keep this one the same, but we'll do it for the directory ID. So what we're going to do is to find your directory ID, you can go back here to your home page and go back to your Azure Active Directory and click on this tenant ID. And this is cut off here, but you can just click on this copy and it'll copy it. And then to create a secret to be able to do this, what you're going to do is go back in your key vault. You're going to generate import. You're going to create another name. Okay, we're going to do tenant ID 2. And then we're going to Control V and paste that tenant ID. Okay, and so we're going to create the name right there, just so we know. And then we're going to save this. So that's saved. So that tenant ID value is saved now in the key vault. And so to version control this, since we're in Python and it's an object-oriented programming language, well, let's do this here. And now we're going to use this secret scope here. Okay. And instead of this application key, we're going to use that one we just created for the tenant ID. Tenant ID 2. All right. And I'll show you why we do this. Now, if you just run this one line of code by itself in a different cell, and again, to run a cell, you're going to hit Shift and Enter at the same time. So hold Shift and Enter. It will show you this is actually going to be redacted. So it's not going to bring in the actual value, so it's a lot safer to use. And then now that we have this saved under this tenant ID 2, now we're going to do that here. Now, if you don't want to do that and you just want to type in that, just paste your Active Directory tenant ID right in here, and you don't have to do this if you don't want to. I'm going to show you how to version control this if you want to keep everything safe. So to do that now for me, we're going to do this. We're going to add ID2 plus this right here, and we're going to do that. Now, the last step. This is our source, so we're going to do we're going to mount the data lake and connect this now. So the source, this stands for Azure Blob File System Secure. So that's our data lake storage file system. Okay, and the file system name is going to be back up here. And if you remember, we created it as container 9. Okay, for our file system name. And our storage account name is just the data lake storage name that you originally picked out, right? So mine's data lake NJL7. Again, whatever name you chose for your data lake storage account is going to be that one, okay? And then our mount point, you can pick whatever name you'd like. So data lake new mount 11. Okay, and then once you do that, we will be all set to run this. So you can click on that to run it. Secret, let's see what we did here. Key vault, secret name, application secret. Let's see. Scope does not exist. Let's see what we did here. So we'll go back to our Databricks. Application secret 2, that's why. Okay. Application secret 2. Now we run this. It's just going to take a second here to mount this and collect this. And once you see this, this is a really, really good sign. It means that it's working. All right. Once you see this true sign, that means that this has now been mounted, which is perfect. So just to wrap this video up for us, if we want to load in now a piece of data here, what you can do is type in this command here. Now you can create an object here. You can create it as 222 or AZ, or we'll just create a DF here for a data frame, and then you use the Spark, which is just in PySpark. And again, in the next video, I'll show you more about this and what to do. But just to show you an example here, we're just going to read this CSV file in. And again, what's our mount point name, right? So we're going to go back up here, and it's data lake new mount 11. So it's data lake new mount 11. And then what you're going to do is back in your data lake, remember how we created different folders? And one of the folders was folder 9. Okay. If you just had it as just the file, you can just do data.csv. Since you created that one folder, we're going to do folder 9 and slash, and then our CSV file, which is data.csv name. Okay, all we're going to do, and then down here you can do a function called display and display the data frame, and then we're going to run this. And it will display the data. So if you're a little bit confused about how this all works here, don't worry. In the next video, I'm going to go over how to read files, how to access files, and actually how to use our Python script to transform the data in the next set of videos. But this just shows you that all the data was loaded in. So it's perfect. So that really wraps up this section of the video. Thank you so much for your time. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how to load in data, how to transform it, and use Databricks to use different programming languages in Databricks in a particular notebook. Thank you again for your time, and I'll see you in the next video.